Welcome, everybody, to this new session of Crop TV. In this one, I'd like to share with you some changes that are coming for our P&K soil test interpretation and fertilization guidelines in our publication PM 1688. Every time I talk about P&K, I show these slides, so maybe several of you have seen it already. But it's just a reminder of the things that I believe are important in Iowa for P&K management. We need to know the optimum soil test levels and application rates for deficient soils. And then, of course, you people, the farmers or the consultant need to think about what is it they want. And do they want to get a good return or maximum yield or build up fast? So we usually explain what our guidelines are so they can interpret them right. We also need to know the average yield and removal with harvest for P&K in order to maintain whatever soil test levels you want to maintain. We recommend to maintain what we call the optimum category. Another thing is that after 30 years of working in Iowa fields, I know there is huge, large within-field variation of soil test, yield, and removal in many fields. So I have been advocating for a long time use of good soil sampling, then sampling, yield monitors, variable rate technology, and so forth. And then in Iowa, the fertilizer placement is not a big issue. We have had research for many years, but the phosphorus banding isn't better than broadcast for any tillage system, other than some low rate of starter in some conditions. And for potassium, we did find that we have a big response for ridge till. The old ridge till with permanent ridges that there are not many anymore in Iowa. And but then only occasionally there is a response to deep banding with no till and strip till, and but seldom will offset the extra application costs, And then there is unlikely need for deep banding with tillage using a chisel plow disc or the old plow tillage. So this is just as a general introduction. Now, this is a publication that we are updating, and it has been in the Extension Publications office since before Christmas, but they are working on that. I was told that it was going to come up late December or early January, but as usual, it may come up, mid-month or something like that, okay? The last update was in 2013. So I'm going to show you why we believe that there should be some changes, not too radical, but some changes. So soil testing and soil test calibration with yield response is a key of P&K management. This has been a major portion of my work for 30 years here. And we know that soil testing is a fundamental aspect of P&K management. It doesn't matter how you people interpret those results, but it's key that it's done right, because if not, you are building a castle on thin air, if we don't have, the right soil test results. You need to remember that soil P&K tests are indices. They measure the concentration of a nutrient fraction that is related to what is available for crops. It's almost impossible, especially for P&K, to know exactly what the plant will see during growth, in the season. So soil test calibration with crop response gives meaning to soil test values and help determine applications for different soils and crops. So the calibration, it has people talk about field calibration or soil test methods calibration, but there are two parts. One is the field correlation of soil test methods with response, that this is important to define the optimum levels and define the soil test interpretation category, very low, whatever. And for this, need trials with a control and at least one non-limiting, non-excessive rate. Now, field calibration per se is more complicated because we need trials with many rates because the objective is to find the application rates for the load testing categories to attain maximum yield or maximum economic yield. We need to find the application rates that maintain optimum soil test levels over time. And for this, we need trials with several treatments. So they're more expensive, but we have done many of those. Okay, this is a summary of the current guidelines in PM 1688. Remember, these are the current ones, not the new. The reason I'm showing it is because I want to emphasize a couple of major concepts in our guidelines that will be maintained. Okay, so here, for example, we have for phosphorus the soil test P categories, very low to very high, for 4 tests that we have been calibrating over time with field response, which is the Bray 1 or Melic 3 classic colorimetric. So we have those ppms there. Then we have the Melic 3 when it's the same extractant, but when it's measured by ICP, several labs are using that now. And I'm not going to get in details, but with this ICP method of measuring the extracted P, we get higher numbers. So we need to have different yardstick. And then the Olsen method, which we did the first calibrations in the 90s for this test in Iowa, traditionally has been used mainly for calcareous soils, okay? And again, you see that the ppms are different. So we need to have these calibrations to give a meaning to those soil tests. Okay, then I have the recommendations there below in the slide. And in the publication we have and will have one table more complex than this for corn, one for soybean, and one for corn-soybean rotation and for all other crops. Okay, I'm showing here corn-soybean and the application for the corn-soybean rotation when the application is done only once before corn or soybean. That many farmers do that. So what I want to emphasize here is 2-3 things. One is the recommended rates that we have there for the very low and low categories. For example, for corn, 100 or 75 pounds per acre. Those follow the long Iowa tradition of having rates that are designed to maximize yield in most conditions. Okay, we don't use yield level for those, and those are supposed to get yield in most conditions. We have all the research in order to prove that. So that's one thing. So people believe that we are recommending little P or K. Well, we are recommending for maximum yield in most conditions, no matter the price. They're not rates to get maximum economic yield. And we have several reasons for that. It's because we believe that even in rented land, farmers should not reduce those rates because they are very profitable. So if there will be a mistake, it has to be to put a bit more than not less. Okay? Then we have the optimum, that in the optimum, what we say there is to those rates are default, see, because the labs always ask us to put some default yield because often they don't get the yield from farmers. So in 2013, we put there that footnote that says there are 180 bushels of corn and 55 for soybean. But we say very clearly there is a table, and we say many times in the publication that farmers should use their own average yield, not the yield goal, the average yield, okay? And then we recommend nothing in the high except for some starter in some conditions. And then that 50 there in parentheses for the corn-soybean rotation is because if the farmer is applying every 2 years, if he needs to, say, is in the border high, say in the lower part of the high range, then they can apply about 50 pounds just to be sure that the second crop has the pounds needed there, or he can skip it and then go again, next year with a removal. Okay, so this is important because these are the things that we need to change if we want to maintain those concepts of our guidelines. Okay, so this is those who have followed me over the years have seen that I have been showing this since 2014 out there. This is the the database for corn and soybean that we had until then. So in the y-axis, we have relative grain yield. That's not response. Those are relative yield. So when the points are near the 100, that means there is little or no response. And when they are low, means there is a response. And you can see we have the interpretation classes current there now. These are the current, okay, for corn and soybean, okay? That's what we had before. So with many trials that we have done since 2013, each of these points is a trial that we've done until 2020. It's about the same in general. You see, if you look at these, maybe there are a few points below the 100 line, that maybe were not before, things like that. But there is not much change, okay? But this is what we are proposing. This is a complicated graph. It's the only way I figured out how to show this. This is the new database with the new information and some of the old ones that I deleted all data and some that had very low yield. So what we have here is the same thing. It's the relative grain yield response. And then at top of the two graphs for corn and soybean, you see those red numbers are the current categories. So the ppms by the Brave method or the MELIC3 colorimetric, I'm not showing the numbers for all the methods. So you see that for the very low, it used to be 0.8, 9 to 15, the optimum 16 to 20, etc. Okay, and then in blue letters below, and those vertical lines in blue, those are the new categories that are coming up. So if you look at this, the old and the new borders for the categories are exactly the same for corn and soybean. You see that we increase just a little bit, 1 ppm or 2, the very low and low classes upwards, to increase a little bit. But there is an important change is for the optimum category. Remember, the optimum category is the one that there is a low probability of response, but we recommend applying removal to maintain those soil test values over time. So the optimum, we increase it for quite a few ppm. So now we have that the optimum is from 18 to 25 parts per million, okay, for both crops. And we have the same thing for other crops, in the publication. Now, I want you to know the reason for that. It's just a little bit that maybe the new data shows that maybe we need a bit higher. But you saw the graph, it's about the same. Really what has happened is that we have become really concerned because every year we get lots of information about that, about two things. One is that the variability out there, the spatial variability of soil tests, even for people that are doing a good grid sampling, 2.5 acre, and maybe 8-10 cores per sample. Most don't do that. Most take just 4 or 5 cores, but they should take 8 to 10. Even by doing that, there is large variability. So we prefer, that has been our tradition for the Iowa recommendations, to be sure that the farmer has the fertility there, because they are paying for all kinds of things very expensive, like the hybrids, the varieties, the combines, or the pickup trucks, everything. And I believe that in Iowa soils, if somebody would make a mistake, the mistake should be to put a bit more and not less. Okay, so this is one reason that we are doing that. The other reason is that we were always a bit concerned that the optimum category was very narrow. See, just 5 ppm. If you look at the red numbers. And the variation out there is so big, that we need to be more conservative, And so we decided to make it wider, increasing the upper border by about 5 parts per million. Okay. The other thing that worries me and is behind these changes upwards a bit is that in spite of the about 15 years or 20 years of the North American proficiency testing and another one that is out there for the labs, the bias between labs is still huge. It has improved thanks to the NAPT and some other program that's called ALP, but still there is a huge bias. And because in his infinite wisdom, our department chair decided to close our soil testing lab in the fall of 2017, you see, we don't have this our lab anymore. It's not that I miss it because it was the best lab, because we could make mistakes as other labs do. But now, you see, we have no choice to rely in this testing, in private labs, because there's no way I can have 2,000 samples analyzed by a graduate student, in the department. So I know the difference between labs can be large. So that's another main reason to change this interpretation categories, because Iowa farmers are sending samples to different labs. There are some difference there. And so we want to be sure that these are kind of appropriate, but that are not causing yield losses out there. Okay? Now, these are the yields. And I'm not going to go too in detail because it's the same thing that I show for relative yields, but these are actual yields. Now, it's important. See, there is much more variation when we use actual yields than when we use relative yields. But you can see here that, for example, in corn, in the very low, you can have, almost always there is a response, and you can have up to 100 bushels response there. Now, when you go to the high or the very high, you average all those points in there at the zero or below. And for soybean, it's the same thing. So I'm showing this, and because, farmers should think about it. And consultants that want the best for their farmers, when they are using, a good dense soil sampling, grid sampling well done, etc., and if they see that they have major portion of the field in the very high, they don't need to apply anything. And if the farmer cannot sleep at night, can put just maybe a low starter rate, just in case, see? So that's why I'm showing these yields. Now, this is another important thing, because this is what we use in order to make the changes. We want to maintain the basic concept that we had before about the meaning of these classes, you see. There are only 2 states in the North Central region that have this very clearly. What the heck is the very low? What does it mean? That's Wisconsin and Iowa. So in the left chart, you see the probability of a response, okay? So this essentially is these responses that we have here in each class. What is the probability that there is a response? So for the very low, it's about 90%. For the low, it's about 50%. For the optimum, it's about 20%. That's what we want. We always wanted the probability of response in the optimum, for which we recommend removal-based application. The probability of response is less than about 20% or 25%, and of a low response, okay? And then the high and the very high, we want to have a very low probability of response. So this is what this new soil test interpretation do according to our information, our database. Then the graphs on the right shows the average yield increases, okay? So for example, the very low for corn, it means that those points that you saw out there, on average, the response is about 35 bushels per acre. In the low, it's about 12, 15. In the optimum, is 3 or 4. And in the high and the very high, it's almost nothing, okay? and soybean is the same thing. So this is something that you guys should look at, because this is demonstrate clearly what is our philosophy and concepts in terms of our interpretation. Then you can do whatever you want, but this is what we believe it is, okay? For potassium, it's the same thing. I will not repeat because the concepts are the same. The only thing is that in Iowa, for potassium, the MELIC3, the ammonium acetate, they give the same number. So what we have here since 2013 is that we introduced this moist or slurry test. Some people call it the wet test, which is much better, but we still decided to keep our recommendations for the dry samples method with more slabs too. And then we have the recommendations, and the concepts are exactly the same, okay? So this is the database that we have until 2013 that I have been showing out there. And because I have now the dry test and the moist test, it's important to show both. I put corn and soybean together in each graph. You see the black dots here is corn and the gray is soybean. See, it's about the same, like in phosphorus. So this is what we had before, and we have the classes that are current up to now, okay? Those data showed by 2013 that the dry test was very bad in soils we have poor drainage. And what I mean by that is mainly the Canisteos, the Websters, the Colo, the Judson, all those soils that are very productive, but they have poor drainage. And in this case, the color of the points don't show the crop, show the drainage. So the black is those soils with poor drainage, the moderate is the gray points, and those with good drainage are in white. Okay, so that's what we had before. And as you can see in the left chart, there is a huge dispersion there. Essentially, if somebody wanted to fine-tune potassium fertilization, this test is crap, you see, because it may be kind of okay for the soil with moderate to good drainage, but look at these black points that are all there almost in a vertical distribution, and then they are not aligned with the others, see? However, you look on the right, the moist test, and you see that the correlations are not such great as for phosphorus, but they are much better than for the dry test. And then now, if you have a test value for the good drainage or poor drainage or whatever, it means about the same. So you see all these points are with different colors are aligned on the same curve. That's the beauty of the moist test. That was the beauty. Okay, now this is the new data. And now I'm going back to show black dots for corn and gray for soybean. So, and again, if you look at that and you look at this, we have many more numbers now in the high and the very high. You may notice that. I wanted to be sure that we have those points. And there is only, maybe we should increase the optimum a little bit. But as I explained for the phosphorus, in potassium, the bias between labs is worse than the phosphorus, and there is more uncertainty in the testing than for phosphorus. So these are the new interpretations compared with the old ones. As I said before, now we have corn and soybean in the same graph on the left for the dry soil test, and in the right is in the left, and the right is for the moist test, okay? So at the top in red and the vertical dotted lines, red, show the current borders of the categories. You can see there, and the blue ones are the new ones that are coming out. So you see there that it's very little change for the border between the very low and the low, or for the low and the optimum, but we really increase a lot the upper boundary for the optimum class for the reasons that I explained before, for both tests, for the dry and for the moist test. okay? Then these are the yields. To avoid having too many slides, in these slides I put the yields, actual yields of corn and soybean in the same graph. So you see all the soybean, of course, are down there, and the 20 or 25 bushels increase. So these are the actual responses that we have in that database for each of these categories, okay? And then this is the other part that I was telling you is very important. You see, we have that in the left, we have the probability of a response for the dry test, and we have on the right the probability of response for the moist test. Okay, so as I showed for the phosphorus similar graph, you see that for the dry test we have almost 80% probability of response. For the low is 50, for the optimum is under 25%, for the high is 2-3%, and for the very high essentially is 0, the probability of response. And for soybean, we show about, for the moist test, we show about the same thing, the blue bars. You will notice that the very low bar for the moist test is a bit higher than for the dry. That's because of this moist test is better at discriminating between responses, for the different soil test values. These are the yield. Okay, again, for the new categories, this is actual yield. So on the left graph, we have for things for the dry test, yield increases, and then we have corn and soybean now separate there, and then on the right graph we have corn and soybean too. So the important thing here is that, and as I said, you should look at the things so you fully understand how in the world we came up with these categories and those names. And remember that the optimum doesn't mean no fertilization. It means a low probability of response and maintenance based on removal. That will catch any response there for sure. Okay, now this is the plot now where we have the responses by drainage for the new database, okay? So as we have shown before, the dry test is not good. You see, if you look at all those points, this test is good to tell you when you don't need nothing or when you need a lot. But if you are in between, for example, you go for in the very low and even part of the optimum, you have about the same test results, and you can get 100 bushels or nothing, 0. So there's no way that you can fine-tune your management with this test. That's how we insist, and especially if you are in a region that has these soils with moderate to poor soil drainage. And then again, we see that in the moist test, in the chart at right, the responses are not so neat, as in the phosphorus, but all the points, most of the points, except for a few outliers there, they are aligned along the same curve. So if you have, 60 parts per million by the moist test, it means the same thing, no matter the soil drainage, okay? That's what this means. Okay, over the last couple of years, there have been lots of talk. The wind coming from the north is bringing lots of mention of mineralogy, mainly from North Dakota and lately from Minnesota. See, what happened is that in North Dakota, about 3, 4, 5 years ago, Dave Franzen and collaborators found that they have very different soils with different clay type. So they found that soils that have highly dominant mineralogy, clay mineralogy that we call smectite, that years ago used to be called morillonite. But then there is an area in North Dakota that the dominant clay is illite. And they found that they need different interpretations for those two regions and different rates. So when they put that in place, we have started. I have a graduate student that has been working like 5 years on his PhD. We started doing clay mineralogy here with working with Dr. Michael Thompson here in the department under his guidance. So we're studying the same thing. So Ryan is not ready with his dissertation. We'll be ready probably now in May. But we have these results, and it shows that what we are trying to see, why is that we have this difference for those poorly drained soils, that one test is much better than the other and so forth. So the graph on the left show the clay type, okay? And I grouped them by poor drainage. There are 3 classes there of the USDA drainage classes, moderate on well drained. Now, and then you see all these bars are the different clays that we analyze for: smectite, vermiculite, mica, which is illite, or kaolinite. And the first thing you see in this graph is that we have a mixture of clays in all our soils. You see, this is not what's happened in some areas of North Dakota, and it's not what happened in Minnesota. In Minnesota, they have more contrasting difference in the clay. So what we find here is that, yes, smectite, the black bar, is a bit higher in soils with poor drainage that are, the vast majority are from the Des Moines Low, central and north central Iowa into southern Minnesota, than in the other soils. But we don't have really a clear dominance. You see that in the soils that with moderate drainage, yes, smectite is the highest too, and also in the well drain. So, and then on the right, these color graphs show 3 things, that farmers always ask me about, and we have always get the same thing. On the top graph, we have soil clay, you see. Seems that the soils with poor drainage that we have in our database tend to be a little more fine textured than the others. But look at that. I mean, on average, they are 22% clay, and the other is 18 to 20. It's not really much difference. And then the CC, that's another thing. Yes, it's a bit higher in these soils with poor drainage, but look at the numbers. Just, the well drained, the green bar is about 25, and the red bar is 27. So this is nothing, really, given the errors that are out there in the measurements. And then the calcium, magnesium, potassium ratio, you see, that's another thing. This shows, yes, that maybe the soils with poor drainage have a higher calcium, magnesium relative to potassium. But again, look at that. In the moderate, they're about 50%, and in the red bar is about 54, and even in the well drained, it's not much difference. So our conclusion here about the reasons why there are issues with these soils with highly productive but poorly drained soils is that it is the hydrology regime in the field. These soils go from saturation to very dry over the year, and then when we come at the lab and we dry the samples, then we screw up with those, So it is mainly the drainage, but seems that also interacting with the soil clay, the CC, something like that. But, of course, the drainage is much easier than be measuring all those things that are expensive. So, and the one thing I want to say is that it doesn't matter if the soils are tiled. This happens even when the soils are tiles. Okay, so the other good thing that I mentioned in the first slide for P&K is that the yield level, up to now at least, does not affect the optimum soil P or K concentration, okay, or the rate that maximizes yield, okay? But the yield level does affect the removal, okay? And the application rate needed to maintain the soil test values. So what we always have done, and we keep doing that, is that we use yield and removal base rates only for the optimum category, where there is a small probability response, less than 25%, you saw that, and the removal base rate is higher than needed to maximize yield in any conditions, okay? We recognize that, we say that. So you need to be aware of that, because somebody could reduce that rate in the optimum class. For example, people that rent. You can put starter only 1 year, but if you reduce the rate and you keep the field, then in the future you have to apply more. And then you always need to remember, I have that little table there, that it's very important that in corn, if you are harvesting silage or baling corn stalks and removing from the field, the removal increase by 2-3 times in potassium, but only a little bit for phosphorus, so you need to be careful. Now, we have a database of about 10,000 samples that we analyze for P and K, and in 2013, we adjusted the concentrations that we are suggesting. But analysis of data since 2013 showed no much change. So we are not changing this. This table is exactly what was in PM 1688 and will be here exactly the same. Now, there is another issue that happened with the high yields. Remember that I said that for the very low and low categories, we don't use yield, because the concept in Iowa for 50 years has been to recommend rates that get maximum yield in most conditions, no matter the yield. But what happened? If you have a low or medium yield and you apply those rates, then there is always residual effects, as we call, of P and K in Iowa soils. So you will have higher soil test level after harvesting the crop. If you have very high yield levels, the rate to get the maximum yield does not change, but the residual effect will be less because there is more removal, okay? So because of that, we are increasing a bit. I'm not showing those here. We are increasing the P and K rates for the very low and low soil test category in order to maintain this criterion that we have had for more than 50 years, which is that those rates that we put there are designed to maximize yield. In order to do that, we have to increase them a little bit. Okay, as I said in the introductory slide, we are not changing the placement methods. I could not continue doing the deep banding research since 2013 because it was a black hole of money, and we have had many years of data, but we continued research and in several sites looking at broadcast and planted band methods for no-till, for tillage, for corn, for soybean, and we found exactly the same things. So we are not changing these recommendations. We still keep recommending deep potassium banding for rich till, but there are no many rich till fields anymore. And we do recommend, but we say clearly that the response with no-till or strip tills is occasional, on average, may not pay the extra cost of applying that deep placement. And on top of that, that will complicate the soil sampling and testing a lot. And with tillage, there is no need. And then remember that no matter what some farm magazines or some people say out there, you cannot cut the needed POK rate by banding. Do not cut the rate for very low or low categories because you are banding. Of course, if you are applying P and K in high testing soils, yeah, you can cut all you want because you don't need anything anyway. Okay, so in conclusion, the soil test P and K interpretations and application rates in our publication PM 1688 are changing slightly. It's not a radical change to maintain the major concepts behind our recommendations that we have had for 50 years. this is why we are changing them. Still, remember the key issue for P and K. You need to use good soil sampling methods, use research-based soil test interpretations, yield monitors and variable rate in most fields. This is justified. Use manure nutrients. Yes, I know there is variability in the analysis, there is a variability in the application, but if you apply manure with care, you can cut down lots of money investing in fertilizers. Don't cut P and K rate in low testing soils, even with high prices, even with rented land. If you know you will have that field at least one more year, it's not wise to cut in low testing soil. In soil test optimum, yes, you can, because as I said, that removal base rate is more than needed to maximize yield. That is planned to maintain soil test over time. Okay, so you can reduce it or apply starter for 1 year, whatever, without major yield loss. But in the future, you will have to apply more if you keep the field. Don't apply P or K in high testing soils. If you cannot sleep at night, apply just a low starter rate, just in case. And then, as I've said in many talks before, and I have no stocks on any potassium company, trust me, I always say that there is larger uncertainty with potassium testing than phosphorus or pH for lime, and potassium isn't a water quality hazard. So for potassium, there is uncertainty out there. If you are going to go wrong, you better go wrong by applying more K or maintaining a bit higher than we say, than not with less. And with that, I believe you can, the system let you send me questions and email messages. So hopefully this is useful for all of you. Thank you.